Three.
Welcome to the Virtual Real Estate Investing Podcast. Take two, because Frank didn't like our first intro. How you doing today, Frank?
Dude, on the intro, I just stuttered and bumbled over myself for like 30 seconds. I had to start this thing over. So take two. I'm feeling great. How about yourself?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. I'm excited to talk real estate. I think being in a startup and the pressures that come with being in a startup and trying to grow and all the craziness, and we're both family men, like it can be a lot. And I'm excited to just talk real estate on the podcast. It's becoming one of the highlights of my week each week these days.
Yeah, I'm pumped, man. And today we're going to talk about something super top of mind for us that we're excited about. I think I'm going to mostly ask you questions since this is kind of your job. We're going to talk about acquiring and underwriting self-storage facilities or commercial real estate, I guess, in general. And being that you're the head of acquisitions for that part of our business, for the self-storage facilities, you're going to be answering the questions. Are you prepared?
I hope so. I think so. I feel very comfortable talking about how we are currently underwriting self-storage. I think there'll be a lot of ways we can carry it over to commercial overall, commercial properties, but I think it'll mostly be self-storage and it'll be value add, right? So one of the buzzwords of the last 5 years is value add. And the way I first started hearing it is people going in multifamily or apartment complex, right? Everyone wanted value add multifamily properties. What does that mean? That means they bought it at a certain price and they were able to add value, right? They put in, they bought it for $1 million. They put in $500,000. So now their basis was 1.5 million. And then the value after that was 2.5 million, right? So they added $1 million worth of value. So what we're talking about today is how can we add value in a storage facility? How do we underwrite it? What exactly are we using? So that's what I'm prepared to answer, Frank. If you got questions, we can jump right into it, man.
Yeah, let's do it. So what type of deals are we looking for? You're talking about value add. What type of value are we trying to add to our storage facilities?
So I think the big difference between how people historically would look at value add in multifamily and storage is historically value add meant rehab, right? Fixing things that were broken or bad, taking an apartment complex and, changing out the floors would potentially be a value add opportunity. Okay. And I mean, that's a great investment strategy, but it's tricky with that. Anyone that's ever flipped a house or done any kind of remodel knows that it almost always comes in over the timeline and over budget. Okay. So using that as your business plan, I think can be really difficult. So when we say value add, we're not talking about physically remodeling or any structural stuff. What we're really talking about is an operational value add opportunity. So what can we do to run the business better that can add value? That's really where we think we have a big opportunity.
And what do those opportunities typically look like?
I think generally they fall into three categories, right? And we can kind of dive into each of them. But I think number one is occupancy, right? What percentage of the units are full, right? And we see a lot of opportunity kind of like over 50%, but less than 90%, right? Like I think the ideal unit or the ideal facility for us would be something like 70% occupied, right? So like they're doing good, but they're only at 70%. And if we can bump that occupancy up, we'll have a big opportunity. Okay. And let me say all three and then we can dig into them. So it's occupancy. Okay. And then the rent rate, like how much they're charging, and then trying to cut down expenses, right? Those are the three big levers: occupancy, the rent rate or that revenue it can bring in, and then cutting down expenses.
Okay. I mean, I don't want to jump into one of the three yet. I want to go high level first. So is this information publicly available?
For the most part, yeah, or no, I guess occupancy is not, right? Like you can look on LoopNet. LoopNet is like the Zillow for commercial properties. There's another one called Crexi, CREXI. Or if you go to Google and type in, storage facilities for sale, you'll start finding the brokers' websites. And there's maybe 10 10 or so real brokerages that hang out in the Southeast United States to go find this information. But then, the rent rate you can find, right? But then when you talk occupancy and expenses, you're going to have to get that from the broker or the owner to really start digging into it.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. Cause like you throw this data out and it's like, well, where the hell do I find that? Right. And there's not a one size fits all answer. Sometimes it's on the OM or the offerings, and sometimes it's not. So if you're a person that's trying to get into storage or really just commercial real estate in general, like how do you start evaluating deals? How do you even know where to go to find deals to look at?
I feel like a sellout by saying this, but you got to go to the brokers, right? Why? Because like we're going to do a lot of off-market deals. Okay. Like we direct to consumer, we are ready to do that marketing. We are ready to negotiate with facility owners. But the bottom line is commercial brokers can be really good. Like they want to get deals done. Right. So that's where you go first is you go to the brokers. A lot of times the OM or the offering memorandum will have that. Right. So you go to the brokers, even if you don't end up buying one of those deals, you can get the OM and you can start underwriting and you can figure out what your buy box is going to be, or, what a good asset for you is. But I think you got to start with the brokers.
And what is your buy box? How do you know which deals to look at?
So we're still working through it. Okay. So we're looking at different scenarios. Okay. I think one of the big metrics that we want to use is, can we, if it's a value add opportunity, can we buy something, buy a facility, execute the business plan, add that value, and then can we refinance and pull out our down payment capital, right? So that metric is, can we pull out all of the capital that we put in there, right? Like that would be part of our buy box criteria, right? Another way to put it is, can we buy, if we look at an optimized net operating income, if we say, what's the best we can run this facility, and we determine a net operating income there, can we buy that at somewhere between an 8 and a 9% cap rate? If we can buy optimized NOI between an 8 and 9% cap rate, I think we're going to be pretty good. Okay. So then you might say, well, John, those are kind of wishy-washy answers, right? Because everyone wants to say, I can buy, a 6 cap on actuals, right? What the business is actually doing. And I think it's in these value add opportunities, it's really hard to just go, how's the business performing right now? And let me put a cap rate on top of that. I don't think we're going to be able to look at businesses like that, because we're really hoping that we can pull those 3 levers, that we can increase occupancy, that we can increase our rent rate, and we can cut expenses. And if we're able to do all 3 of those things, it doesn't really matter what the last owner was operating it at, right? The last owner could be operating a crappy business that's close to break even. And hopefully we can still see the potential that if we pull those 3 levers, we can end up getting to an 8.5, 9 cap once we optimize it.
Yeah. You mentioned our max allowable offer is optimized net operating income divided by 8 or a 9 cap. How did we arrive at that 8 or 9 cap number?
We worked backwards, right? I spent the better part of a week using kind of every commercial real estate deal Excel file I could find. And I had to try to simplify it for me, right? Because a lot of people use Excel spreadsheets and they're like, let me put in the numbers and let's see how much money I could make at the end, right? But the way my brain works, I didn't want to put every single deal into a specific spreadsheet and just spit it out, right? I wanted to be able to look at a deal and within, writing some numbers on a piece of paper, go, hey, does this pass my test, right? Like, do I think we have a deal here? So how did we get to that 8 to 9 cap? It's because we ran a bunch of scenarios and I, stared at a spreadsheet for a week straight until I was like, okay, this is as simple as I can make it. If we can figure out the optimized NOI and then we can buy it somewhere between an 8 and a 9 cap, I know it's going to check these other boxes for us.
Yeah. And it also works because the going rates in our markets stabilized, or stabilized asset, it's selling for a 6 or a 7 cap, right? So basically your math guarantees you're not underwater. or should, as long as you can improve the operations, right? The whole thing's about the value add on the operations side.
That's a good answer. I didn't know you were pushing me that way. That's a great answer, right? Because if you buy at an 8 or 9 cap and you can almost for sure sell it at a 7 cap, it's hard to lose money. That's a great answer.
Yeah. Well, I was trying to lead you there, but we have so many numbers going around right now. We might have to simplify the conversation because so let's say you run the math, right? You got the OM from the broker or the seller. What are some qualitative things you're looking for on the seller side, right? Some things that maybe identify that it's an opportunity, that you're like, oh, this blood in the water, right? This deal. Like, what are some of those things that you're trying to look for?
So I think if we look at occupancy, right? Like I think 70% is a good mark. The other good mark is 100%, right? If they're at 100% occupancy, that only means one thing. That means they're not charging enough, right? So that occupancy number, that's the tell there, right? And then if we look at rent rate, we use a website called Radius Plus. Okay, if you type in self-storage Radius, you can get there. On it, it's not perfect data, but it's good data for rental rates. Okay, you can also call around and you can look online, but Radius Plus will give it to you in a really easy to read format. You can figure out what the average rate is for the area, and then also what the high rate is for the area. So you can say, hey, if it's a 10 by 10 unit, if it's a 10 by 15 unit, what's the average and what's a high? And you can start figuring out, hey, this facility I'm looking at, is it high? Is it medium? Is it low? Right? So you can figure out how much opportunity is there, right? And then for expenses, most of these facilities are going to have a full-time, or a couple full-time people working it. They're going to, have all kinds of expenses that are way too high. The bottom line is standard in the industry is, somewhere around 35%. For something over 50,000 square feet, I think most people are getting it to 30% expenses or below. So I think, we have some opportunities to cut expenses there too.
It's you talk about pricing, and I was thinking about our single family business for a second, and I'd say most of our houses that we've bought and sold in the last 18 months has been from a tired landlord, right? You think someone who's sophisticated, like they're an investor, right? And I think in more than half of those cases, they self-manage and they are under market rent. So a house should be renting for $1,100 and they're charging $750, right? So I think in real estate in general, the number one thing that indicates to me that there's a deal out there is a landlord or business owner that's not charging enough. Like in general, like I think if you are a investor looking to get a deal, look at the asset. Are they charging enough? And if it's well below, like that's 80% of the problem, I think most of the time. So it's just a funny parallel between that and our single family business.
Well, that's a beautiful thing, right? And it's one of those where I think it's pretty easy to look at self-storage like it's a commodity, right? Meaning one metal box for one company is very similar to a metal box at another company, right? Like we can understand that that's a commodity. A lot of people can't realize that a single family home is a commodity as well, right? Because they're like, well, I like this backyard and this one's prettier. It's got granite countertops. But I think if you look at it like a commodity, you can make better business decisions, right? And I always say in self-storage, a lot of the owners we talk to, they're trying to give like a 5-star experience, right? Like they love their customers. And they're trying to make sure they never get a negative review. They're proud of not price gouging, right? As they would say. But what they're really doing is they don't understand that they're selling a commodity and they're not optimizing that commodity, right? They're trying to run a 5-star resort when they are absolutely selling a commodity. So when we see some of those signs, I think, I don't know if we'd say there's blood in the water, but it starts to smell like opportunity for sure.
Gotcha. So let's say a deal, you go on, you get to the broker, see the OM, the deal looks good, checks off the max allowable offer, checks the buy box. How do you make your next move? What's the approach after that?
Well, I think we need to, we'll make the LOI, but one thing I would say first is there's an art to it. Right. So it's not a perfect science to say, this is what we can do to this self-storage facility. Right. So I said, we have to buy at optimized net operating income, right? So how do we determine our optimized net operating income, right? Like how much can we charge for a unit? Do we use the average in the area or do we use the high in the area? Okay. I think it depends on the area, right? If it's, I'm looking at one in Cocoa Beach, Florida, right? Like I think Cocoa Beach, Florida, like those rents are going to keep going up, right? Look at mass migration. It's going there, right? If we look at where I'm from in Northern Michigan, if we look at a storage unit in Northern Michigan, they may see some appreciation, but I would feel more comfortable being pretty conservative looking at a self-storage facility in Northern Michigan, right? So just understanding like there's some thought there, right? There's also some thought of how big the unit is or how big the facility is. If it's a smaller facility, you might not get those, that scale to cut expenses. Where if it's a huge facility, you might be able to cut expenses quite a bit. Okay, so there's some of the art there. But then what do you do, right? Look at a facility. I underwrite the facility. Underwriting is just a fancy word to say figure out the math, figure out what it's worth. I get my offer, right? And then I'm going to talk to the broker and I'm going to say, hey, do you want this in an LOI or a letter of intent, which is, a formal looking piece of paper, but that's all it is a piece of paper. Or do you want me to just tell you, right? And some brokers will be like, hey, just give me a call or shoot me an email when you got it and I'll get it to them. Or some brokers might be like, kind of buttoned up and they're like, no, I want an official LOI to present to the seller. Either way, we'll do it and then we'll make the offer, right? And we're still figuring out our strategy, okay? But we've now made multiple offers, at like 60% of listed value, right? Like under $1 million less than what they're offering because like, hey, this is the number that works for us. It's $1 million off what it's listed for, but let's make the offer and see, right? So we're still trying to figure out that balance. Like, is there a number that's too low that we should just say, hey, it's not a good fit? Right now, we're just making all those offers, hoping that, some of them are going to come through. So.
Yeah, but I mean, things are also priced extremely high, right? So someone's probably who goes to LoopNet or Crexy or any of these websites, and they see the prices that they're currently operating at, even the value adds, and they run their calculations when they're doing their underwriting or fancy math, as you call it. They're gonna be like, holy shit, this thing's super overpriced, right? So do you ignore the price that's on there or how do you treat that?
So this is how I look at it, right? Is I'm seeing a lot of brokers that are, if we think of those three levers, right? Occupancy, rent rate, and expenses. I'm seeing brokers that know what they're doing. So they're making the same assumptions for the optimized NOI as I am, right? Like I'll do all the work and I'll look what these brokers are putting in their pro forma. The pro forma is a fancy word for saying my best guess, right? Brokers are saying their best guess for the optimized NOI is almost the same exact number I'm coming up with, right? So brokers are going like, hey, we're aligned. I see the opportunity here. You see the opportunity here. We agree what this facility can do, okay? But then the next part of the question, it goes like this, is does the broker then take that optimized NOI and try to price it at a 5 cap or a 6 cap and basically says like, hey, I'm not going to leave any meat on the bone. I'm just going to swing for the fences here. Or does the broker say, hey, I see the opportunity here, but I know it's going to take you a bunch of work to get there. So instead of pricing it at a 5 or 6 cap, I'm going to price it at a 7 or 8 cap. Okay. So that's where it starts coming in is this broker just trying to say, hey, there's a bunch of opportunity here, so I'm going to charge you for it? Or is the broker saying, hey, there's a bunch of opportunity here, but I know you're going to have to do a bunch of work. So we're going to leave a bunch of meat on the bone for you. Okay. This is a long answer, but then there's another group. Okay. Those are kind of the sophisticated brokers. There's another group of brokers that have no effing idea what they're doing. They have none. They're completely clueless. And these are people, I mean, selling like $2 and $3 million assets. They have no idea how to evaluate a property. They work for what's called a commercial brokerage, but it's really, they will sell anything. They're probably primarily selling houses. and they're just like, hey, make an offer. Like they're friends of the family and they listed it with me and they made an offer, or they're saying make an offer, but they have no idea. What you can, if you go on LoopNet, half the people will be sophisticated brokers and the other half of the people will have no idea what to do.
Yeah. And that's either going to probably work in your favor or make the deal impossible, right? Because then they're like, well, the land is worth this or that, right? And like, listen, it's worth what it produces. It's a freaking storage facility. It's a business, right? It's all about cash flow. But there are people that are sitting on storage facilities that maybe have a crappy broker, and maybe that thing produces $100,000 of net operating income, but the land it's sitting on is not worth anything, and they will underprice it. Like that is out there, but those are relatively hard to find because they get gobbled up by a cash buyer, I'm assuming pretty quick, but it's definitely possible.
For sure. One of the things we see a lot too is brokers valuing expansion opportunities, right? Like let's say, a storage facility is worth $1 million, but it's got 3 football fields of space next to it where you could build more storage, right? Then the broker's like, hey, if you can build more storage here, instead of being worth $1 million, this is going to be worth $2 million, right? And at this point in time, Frank and I are just saying like, hey, we don't want to build, right? Like we want to buy assets and we want to value assets on the buildings that are already there. We're not going to factor in any development. So then we're offering prices that don't account for this extra land, and brokers are pushing back like, dude, like there's an awesome piece of land this comes with. And I'm just like, hey, we don't even want to buy the land. We'll make you an offer independent of that extra land, because that's just not part of our business strategy right now. Is we try to get traffic, get traction, and we try to become experts in this space. We might eventually start doing that, but right now we need to try to get rid of as many variables as we can, so we're not even evaluating development opportunities.
Well, it's much more speculative, right? Because let's assume the seller in most cases is not a complete idiot, right? Like they have some knowledge of how their facility is supposed to operate. The reason that land is likely to go underdeveloped or not developed yet is because they're probably not at 100% occupancy or 90% occupancy on the existing units they already have. So then you look at, are they doing good marketing? Are they in the ballpark on price? Do you think that you're going to be able to add 100 units and still get it up to 90% occupancy? I mean, I don't know, right? So that's the difference between gambling to some people and value investing. I mean, if you gamble, you can hit big, but if you're a newbie, which we're relatively new, that's, in my opinion, too much to chew off on your first 2 deals. So that's how I look at it.
Warren Buffett says, don't build businesses, buy businesses, right? Much easier to evaluate. Right. One thing I do want to add that I didn't really say in the value add opportunities is the tech piece, right? I don't think we're like high speed coders, but we're pretty comfortable with technology. So one of the big differentiators is if someone has a storage facility, can someone go to their website and rent a storage unit without making a phone call and without actually going to the facility? Okay. And if someone's at 80%, okay, 80% of occupancy, and they require people to call to rent a unit, I think it's a good assumption that if we just add tech and allow people to book online, I think that will most likely take care of that, 10 to 15% opportunity with occupancy, right? And what's also exciting is looking at the competition. Okay. So when we go back to, do we think we're going to be average in the market or the top side of the market? One way to definitely be the top price in the market is if you're able to offer that, rent online. And if you're one of the only facilities that offer that, you can definitely be top of market.
Good. You just summed it up probably best. If you're wondering if it's a deal or not, go to that facility's website and see how easy it is to get a unit and the pricing, right? If both of those things are a bad experience, or you can't tell, or you don't know the pricing by just going to the website, that's an opportunity. Because as a consumer, you're like, I'm going to go exit my browser, open up a new one, and look for another facility that actually has this info available. And you're probably going to buy that one, right? So I agree 100%. That might be the biggest opportunity we have in 2021 and moving forward in storage. Okay. So we kind of talked all over the place around how do you get a deal? What other general guidance do you have for someone trying to break into commercial real estate like us?
Where do I start? Okay.
It's a broad question. Do your best.
I think, I mean, one of our mentors, Nick Huber, talks about save up a bunch of money, right? That's a good place to start, is save up a bunch of money. Okay. Then where do you go? Okay. Then I think you start asking yourself why you want to go to commercial real estate, right? So let's answer that. Why do we want to go to commercial real estate? I think we look at it like we need bigger deal size, okay? Or our business is ready for bigger deal size, okay? So that's why we're going to commercial real estate, okay? If you're along those same lines, then you start going, what asset class do you want to go to, right? And we do really well virtually. So we wanted something with, little management or on-site management required. Okay. So that's what got us to self-storage. And then I would say, and this is a long answer, but then I would say you find the best people in the asset class and you start learning as much as you can from them. Right. And they don't need to be people that run the REITs that are billionaires, but find the people that are 2 or 3 steps ahead of you, right? That aren't billionaires, but that are solid 2 to 3 steps ahead of you, and start diving into them and learning everything you can, right? And we found some of those people, and we're looking for more people that are 2 or 3 steps ahead of us, and trying to learn as much as we can from them. Let me turn it back on you, Frank, because that was a hard question. You're asking really good questions, but that was a hard one.
Yeah.
Okay. If someone wanted to get into commercial real estate, what advice would you have for them?
I'm going to go the funding route, since you took a lot of the underwriting and deal finding stuff. So I think we had success with a local credit union for our deal. And I think that's a good approach. I think if you're talking to someone about doing an operational value add, someone who's maybe familiar with the area might be willing to give you good terms and be flexible on a deal. So I think raising bank funding or credit union funding ahead of time is good, or at least establishing those relationships. And I think you want to tell people about your business plan. So I think it's important to have one, or at least you don't want to have a hope and a prayer. What I mean by that is this: John and I, when we said we were going to go into storage, we're like, hey, in the next 3 years, we want to have $75 million in assets under management. That's roughly 10 facilities a year based on our buy box, right? Then when I go to an investor and I'm like, hey, we don't have a deal that we're ready for you to invest in yet, but one's coming, right? This is what I think it's going to look like. This is our buy box. This is what we're looking for, blah, 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 right? You want to start having those conversations ahead of time, because if you just randomly call someone and you're like, hey, I need you to give me $100,000 because I got this random storage facility in Tulsa, Oklahoma, they're gonna be like, what the hell are you talking about, dude? I thought you were doing single family houses or whatever you were doing, right? So I look at that as like giving like a little bit of a warning or a warning order to your investor audience. Like, talk to them. Like, you don't have to have a deal perfectly ready, but you got to at least communicate what your aim is, and so people aren't surprised. So you'll catch them off guard. So I think on top of the underwriting stuff you covered, I would do those 2 things.
You're right. And I think that leads us into one of the things I don't want to say we're struggling with right now, but we're trying to figure out right now, right? Is deal flow is important, right? Like having deals on a consistent basis is important, right? Well, we have one deal that we're about to close on, and we're working on our second deal. We've had a couple second deals that have been right there, but we don't have a second deal under contract, right? Well, we've raised money for the first deal. Good to go there. So now we're trying to raise money for the second deal, but we don't have it locked in right yet, right? So trying to balance how do we keep deals going, but how do we raise money for deals? How do we balance that perfectly is something we're figuring out, right? And we don't have the perfect answer for it, but we know, we got to figure out what that looks like for us.
Yeah, I think it's for raising money, you got to stay organized. Like, you have a CRM for raising money, just like you do for anything else. Like we have on our Monday.com board, we use that for our CRM for housing. And now we use it for investor capital raising as well. Like, there's 30 people on there and it says committed, interested, not interested, stuck, whatever, like all the different statuses, their pledged amount of capital, what they have available. And you can put notes in there. Like, just stay organized, right? Like, there's no way you're going to remember every single person you talk to over the course of a year, unless you're just amazing and super smart. So just be organized about your effort and make sure you do it every week, right? It's 2 to 3 conversations a week. Stay organized. I think most people could do that and probably succeed. So that's it.
Yeah. The one thing I would say, I know we have a certain contingent of our listeners that are like fresh college grads, like, 20 to 25 years old. And I know when I was 20 25 years old. The idea of raising $100,000 or $1 million, there's no way I could have comprehended that, right? So I would just tell those younger guys and gals out there that it gets easier, right? Like your friend network when you're 25 is going to be generally poor, but your friend network when you're 35, chances are is going to have a significantly higher net worth, right? So just understand that. Like it is hard when you're younger to raise money, but it does get easier and easier every year.
I challenged our CPA, Larry Dixon, who's been on our podcast. He started doing some real estate investing over the last year, and I challenged him to raise, I think, 500 grand for single family housing to do flips and stuff. And he raised like $1 million, and he just bought 3 deals this year with none of his own money. And he's 27, I think, maybe 28. He's still a young kid. I mean, it did it in 30 days. I guess what I'm saying is like, if you're passionate about it and you talk to enough people, it's a sales funnel, just like anything else. You're probably going to succeed. So I don't know.
For sure. Okay. Let's wrap it up. I got a few plugs to make. You got any other questions you want to make sure we hit, Frank?
Nah, I'm good.
Okay. So here's one plug is we decided to stiff arm, to spike, to do whatever to real estate education. Okay. We do not claim to be real estate educators. We're trying to document our journey and provide as much value as we can through this podcast, but we're not planning on doing any type of education stuff anytime soon. Okay. But what we want to do is we want to offer consulting because we get a lot of people that want to jump on a call with us. Okay. So the idea of a consulting call is you come ask us any question you want to ask us. We'll answer it, but it's a relationship that is generally going to last the 1 hour consulting call. Okay. So if you are interested in that, hit us up. I want to plug our acquisitions manager and our dispo manager though. So if you want to talk all things acquisitions, you can talk to Adam, our acquisitions guy, who is just crushing it. He's gotten, over $200,000 under contract, wholesale contracts this month. Okay. If you want an hour with him, send him an email, adam@graylineinvestments.com. And he's doing some consulting. Super pumped about it. At the same time, on the backside of our business, if you want to know what we've told them is share everything, right? If you want to know how our business is going, those two guys aren't going to hold back. So hit them up. If you want to hit up me or Frank, our email addresses are John, JOHN @Grayline Investments, and Frank's is FRANK, Frank@graylineinvestments.com. Also, if you're interested in self-storage, you want to hear more about it and you want to talk to us and see about our next deals, you can hit either one of us up. And remember, our single family business is still rocking and rolling. So buy our deals, check out our deals. If you have a deal that you want to JV with us on, send it to deals@graylineinvestments.com. Make sure you check out our Facebook group as we're trying to get more and more active there. That's all I got. Frank, you got any words of encouragement as we wrap this up, man?
I don't. Have a great rest of the week, everybody.
All right. Thanks, team. Take care.